What do you do when a team member is in crisis? Today with Kim Hamer, we look at how to respond when the team member or a teammate, coworker, or even your manager all of a sudden is confronted with a crisis.
Welcome to Masters of Employee Development, Mike Acker's YouTube segment devoted to training team members in any type of organization. Your host is a best-selling author, corporate trainer, and business leader. Find out more about Mike at mikeacker.com. Each episode, Mike welcomes a CEO, HR director, or other experienced manager responsible for leadership and development. Together, Mike and his guest expert discuss training successes, challenges, and best practices. Lean in, listen, and take part in a community dedicated to improving life through increasing leadership. Now, here's your host, Mike Acker.
Kim, welcome to the show. Glad that you're here today.
Mike, thank you so much for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Now, what I like to do is to dive right in and grab a hold of the attention of those who are driving and turning it on right now and going, why should I pay attention today? And today, I really believe that you should pay attention because even when we're talking about Masters of Employee Development, there's more than just the measuring of the KPIs. There's more than just vision. So let's get a little bit personal. And you and I talked about this beforehand so that this is not me putting you on the spot. Tell us a little bit about what happened to you, and then we'll go into what others can do to manage crisis.
Sure. So back in 2006, my 6'6", very athletic, organic eating family man husband was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. He was the major breadwinner of our family. And after 9 months, he was what I call disentangled from cancer. And then he got cancer again, less than 2 years later, and he died at the age of 44. And we had 3 children who were 12, 9, and 7 at the time. And as I'm sure your listeners can imagine, it was devastating. It was devastating to our family. It was devastating to our community. It was devastating to his work community. And something I noticed during that time was some people knew exactly what to say and what to do, and some people didn't. And for those who didn't, they were just kind of flustered, or they didn't say anything at all throughout this whole experience. Some friends became very close, and we also lost some friends as well. So a couple of years after that, I sat down and I wrote a book, 100 Acts of Love, A Girlfriend's Guide to Loving Your Friend Through Cancer or Loss, as a tool for those who didn't know what to say or what to do. Because one thing I realized during that journey is everything that somebody did, the smallest little thing that somebody did, was hugely helpful. So I wrote that book for them. And then I also went back into my career as an HR professional. And what I noticed, the same thing I noticed when I was dealing with cancer in a personal life, I noticed when happened in the workforce. People didn't know what to say or what to do. Managers sometimes ignored the issue. I would see employee engagement go down. I would see productivity go down on teams because everyone was kind of running around, not sure what to do. And people were afraid to have honest and open conversations with the employee who's being affected by cancer or any health crisis. So last year, I set up a consulting business specifically to support managers and HR teams on how to support an employee and the team when they're dealing with a health crisis.
Well, so interesting because in this podcast and this YouTube segment, I've covered with a lot of different people vision, and we've gone through meetings in a lot of different areas. And I shared with you before, we haven't really done this side. This is a very compassionate counselor, pastoral shepherding type of situation. And I shared with you that when I was 25, I was actually in my office and I got a phone call and that my mom had been in a car accident and had died. And my niece was on life support and we didn't know if she was going to live. And the way that my boss at the time handled it was just so amazing, took off all the responsibilities off my plate. And then they gave me a whole bunch of extra money so that I was able to take care of all those different things that just show up and waste money because I just wasn't in the right mindset to manage my money. And it was eating out all the time near the hospital and all those kind of things. And it was just so strong support. But even then, coming back after 2 weeks becomes a little bit weird. And what do people do and how do they manage it? And
Absolutely.
And then years later, I was in a situation I shared with you where there was a lot of stuff going on, and there was actually more pressure put on. Instead of understanding where I was at, there was pressure put on. So I'm sure as people are listening here, maybe you're an HR manager, maybe you are just a leader of some sort, you're a director, you have a small business, or you're aspiring towards leadership. What do you do when someone on your team goes into crisis? In fact, not do you, beyond just what do you do? Great question to start with here is, someone goes through crisis. What is something that you can say? What do you say to them, Kim?
So our go-to phrase in this country seems to be, if you need anything, let me know. And it sounds so helpful. It really does. But unfortunately, it is absolutely the least helpful thing you can say. And here's why. One, what is anything? If you're in the office and you know this person, if you're friends with this person, you go over to their house on the weekend, you know their kids, anything is huge. Even if you're just a general coworker, what is anything? Right? I had a toddler at the time my husband was diagnosed. Does that mean you're going to take your beautiful, brand new BMW, drive up to the school and pick up my vomiting toddler as a single person, right? Or did you mean that you were willing to go out and grab me a gallon of milk when I needed it? So anything is too big. The second thing is you're asking the person who's in crisis, who may look like they're okay. I'm sure you looked okay when you came back, but you weren't dealing with a full deck of cards. So you're asking that person who's in crisis under a great amount of pressure to take apart their life and to figure out that one thing that you might be willing to do. And let's say that they do figure out that one thing that you might be willing to do, then you're asking that same person who's extremely vulnerable right now, you're asking them to come to you to ask you to do something that you may not want to do. Right. So it's one of those things where, I would be I cannot tell you how many times I boiled water and ran out of pasta. Like I would go into the cabinet to get the pasta to feed everybody and realize I was out of pasta. So now I have to figure out, Mike, when you said, did you do anything? Does that mean like you go out and get me pasta like right now? So I would have to have the courage to ask you and to possibly hear that thing in your voice where you go, yeah, I'll do it, knowing that you really don't want to do it. So we all know that asking for help is really, really hard. So I say instead, be specific about what you want to do. And I walk my clients through an exercise where we walk through a day in the life of, and it's so easy to find a specific thing that you can offer and offer more than once, because the person who you're dealing with right now isn't dealing with a full deck of cards, and they're probably not going to hear you. The other thing too is, please remember, it is so hard. We are so good at giving help, but we are so bad at accepting help. And so when you offer more than once the same thing, the very specific thing over and over again, the person is actually more likely to reach out to you when they need that one thing.
What tends to be one of those one things that employees, team members, coworkers really need when they're going through something?
Yeah, well, there's no one answer, unfortunately. And that's why managers have to have the courage to and the tools to sit down and have those conversations with employees who are in crisis. And of course, there's a lot of legal questions you want to stay away from. You don't want to ask specifics about what kind of cancer or, what's their drug treatment, but you can say, hey, look, I really, first of all, and this is usually in two different conversations. The first conversation, you are shocked, and you can say things like, I don't know what to say. That is a perfectly normal thing to say. Yeah. You can say, that's stuttering, and you can say, I'm so sorry. And I know those words don't feel like they're enough, but in the moment they actually are, because this person your employee is taking an opportunity to tell you something that's happening to them. It's a very personal issue. And so you don't have to do, and I'm using air quotes for those of you who are listening, you don't have to do anything initially. You just want to take that moment to take that breath and to grieve and feel sad with them and for them.
And I want to add in something not to say. You don't want to say, unless you truly have been through the exact same thing. And even then, I would say, don't say this. I know what you're going through.
You nailed it.
Because I had my mom died, and I had this well-meaning lady said, I know just what you've been through. And then she went in, she said, 25 years ago, my mom died. And so she's quite older than me, right? And I'm like, okay, yeah. So now you just made this about you.
Yes.
And you're now processing your pain 25 years later. Now, what's interesting is now it's been 15 years since my mom died.
Right.
And so when I hear someone who experiences a loss, there is an element of, I know what you're going through.
Yes.
But I'm also thankfully smart enough not to say that.
Yes.
If there's a time, maybe I'll share, I've been through something. This is what I've been through. And sometimes there's a connection there, but man, woo.
Yeah.
She lost me when she said, I know exactly what you're going through.
Yep, exactly. There are a lot of phrases that are very common phrases. Another one is don't say at least. So I'm sure you probably heard along the line, well, at least your niece is still alive, right? It's a way of diminishing.
Or at least she's in heaven.
Like, at least she's in a better place. I was like, my husband being here with his kids is a better place.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, God, I don't feel like you need that angel right now.
Yeah. Can I punch you right now for saying that? So,
exactly.
So avoid workroom brawls by not.
Exactly. And that's the thing about crisis is, things get said that are inadvertently unfeeling, that are not nice. And that affects the employee relationship when they get back to work.
Yeah.
Because they may not even remember what that other employee said to them, but they remember the way it made them feel. We all know that rule, right? People may not remember your name, but they're going to remember the way you made them feel. And so it's really important that when the manager gets this information, that the second question they ask is who else on the team knows? Because they're going to have to start doing, what you could call damage control, or just kind of controlling and making sure that the employee with cancer and the team is able to support each other and this person in a way that's really helpful. Because this crisis, hopefully it'll be over, and then that person will return to work full time, and we can talk about not all people with cancer leave work. You had the opportunity, you needed to leave work because your mother died, but not all employees with cancer or in crisis actually leave work. So there's these very small little adjustments that need to be made and consistently that managers don't think about because it's not in the manager training manual. There's not I don't know, maybe I should check. There's not an AMA course on, how do you have these tough conversations with an employee?
Right. And sometimes probably a lot of the people listening right now, you might be 28 years old. You might be 34 years old.
Exactly.
And you may or may not have gone through a lot in life. Some people have gone through a ton when they're 15. But you may have not gone through life. You may have never experienced the death of a friend through a cancer. And so you don't have that experience of having gone through something like that. And without that training, you are at odds. And maybe a lot of people I get to work with, they're young startup companies. So everybody's in their 20s and 30s. And so who's training who in those regards? So this is great for people to grab a hold of. And I know we're not going to be able to cover everything, so people can always look up Kim Hamer, and she'll give you some different links, and we'll put those in the show notes as well. When we look at this, give us an example of maybe someone you've helped through this so that we can kind of get a picture of it, and then we'll unpack some questions like how do we balance KPIs and grades, productivity and compassion, and what does it say about your leadership, and then even some of the process that you have. But help us paint a picture of what you've done to help someone in this situation.
Sure. So I had a client call me, and she said she's in a very unique position in her organization. She's kind of one of the only one who does what she does. And she said, I have this very bad cancer. And I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't know whether I'm going to continue to work. I just don't know. And I said, have you told your boss? And she says, yes, he's been great. He said, anything you need. And that sort of made me cringe. Right.
Yeah.
And he also said, I'll do whatever I can. And that also, even though it sounds like a really great thing to say as a manager, it also kind of made me go, because there are limits to what you can do as a manager, because you have to manage your team. You're expected to produce something.
Yeah.
So we had a very good conversation. I asked her a lot of questions because, she hadn't figured out what her treatment was, and she didn't really know all that information. So when she found that information, I said, let's have a conversation with your boss. And at first, her boss wasn't really, kind of like, we don't really need to talk about this. And she insisted. So her boss and I, the three of us, had a conversation, and we were able to talk about, she said, hey, I think I don't want to work. And he's like, okay. And then I said, Kristen, how would you like to message this to the team? And he's like, oh, good question. Yeah. How do you want me to handle this to the team? And so she was able to share how she wanted it handled. And then, she was going to put together a list of people who she was going to message throughout the process. And, his question, which was on my list of, do you want other people on the team on this list? And she said, no, you can deliver the information. Right. So there's all these little things that are really important. I said, Kristen, do you want someone showing up your door with a casserole? She said, absolutely not. But I can provide a list of things that I want so that my boss can tell people at work so that they can feel like they're involved, right? So it was having those conversations. Now, in the middle of this, she is also training someone to help her. So there's a period of about 3 weeks where there's this new trainee coming in who no one else can train, who she has to work with. And so we talked a little bit about a work plan and what that looks like for that new trainee, and how that trainee was going to have to feel like was going to have to really reach out to this person on a regular basis, because she needed the support. So those are just some of the things that managers just don't think about. They think, okay, this person, they think it's an individual event, when it's not. It's a team. I talk about cancer as an entanglement, because that's what it is. And I think about Christmas tree lights, and how they get all tangled up. Well, that's what cancer is. Cancer doesn't just affect the person with it. It affects their family. It affects their manager. It can affect the organization, depending on the size of the company. It can affect, other teams. So it is really an entanglement, and it entangles many, many different people. And managers don't think about it that way. And that's what I want managers to really start to think about, is that this has many, many tentacles. It's a pebble and it's a rock in a pond. And how do you manage a rock in a pond?
I want you to think about this question. How do you get ahead of this? Because it was an entanglement of sorts happened to somebody that I was leading. And I've had all kinds of different employees in the last 20 years. And in one situation, I had this one person who went through something very shattering. And I remember that I wasn't ready for it. I wasn't ready for, it was the first time that had happened. And so I called some mentors, and thankfully got some feedback. They didn't exactly know what to do either, because of the situation. But at least I had someone to talk to, but I wasn't prepared.
Right.
I wasn't ready. And now it's happened at different times, but how do you get ahead of that? Because as someone's talking there might be going, oh man, I'm glad this isn't happening to me. And I've never had that happen, so I can't really relate. But if you're in leadership long enough, if you're in management long enough, if you're a master of employee development, that means you're going to have a lot of people that are reporting to you, coming to you, some way that you're developing them in some kind of situation. So how do we get ahead of it?
That is a really great question. And Mike, I've been on a lot of business podcasts, and no one's ever asked that. So that's a really good question.
That's just because I'm very smart.
No, I will go with that. Yes, you are very smart.
Good answer, Kim. No, seriously, how do we get ahead of it?
So I think the first thing is, one of the things I notice is your listeners are very value driven, right? They are really employee driven. So your listeners have already kind of beat it a little bit it because you are focused on employee development. So you understand what your employee needs, you understand how you're trying to get them to grow. So your people are having those conversations with your employees, some tough conversations, right? It's not all like, yeah, you're doing so well. It's like, hey, if you want to do this, you need to stop doing this. So you're already used to having those difficult conversations. I think understanding how to use work plans. Work plans go by many different names. Sometimes on the one extreme, when an employee isn't performing, you're talking about a performance improvement plan. On the other side, you're really talking about kind of setting goals. But really, those work plans that you have with your employees, what you do when you have an employee with cancer, you actually kind of double down on those. You have them more frequently because cancer and treatments change how someone can show up at work. I think making sure that you have really good, clear communication with your team. I don't like the word that people use all the time about being transparent, because if you have to say it, to me, that means you're not being it, right? But you want to make sure you have the kind of communication plan that, where you're talking to your team on a regular basis, where there is that, what makes burnout go away, we've recently discovering, is that having that connection with your employees and that team at work. So making sure that you're talking with each other, you know each other, you understand each other, because the real way to get ahead of this is to understand how to balance the work side with the personal side. And when you are dealing with employee development, you're already sort of starting to do that. You're already on that way where you're dealing with that combination. So I don't think there's any one thing you can do, but it really is about your leadership style and how you bring people together as a team.
Really, the way that you lead through crisis is a lot about your leadership style.
Exactly. And the way you lead through crisis is really, it's like an emergency project. I think that's sometimes the way to think about it. It's the project that just got plopped on your lap that has to be taken care of ASAP. And you need the whole team to come together and to work on it, diligently. And it's going to be extremely disruptive. It's going to cause chaos and be disruptive. And I think that's the best way for leaders to look at that. Because when you look at it that way, it makes it more manageable.
I'm thinking about this right now and thinking about how it's not only being very aware of what is happening with that person and knowing how they want to manage it. Some are going to want to power through. Hey, just ignore it. I want you to know what's going on, but I'm going to work harder. The crisis is happening and I need this to distract me. And other people won't even be able to work because it's all they can think about. But not only knowing the team, or the team member, but knowing the team, because that event might trigger something in someone else.
Exactly.
So how do you manage that aspect? So say right here, we have an IT manager who's listening. We have maybe a small business owner, and say these people have maybe 12 people who are on their team to some degree of direct report. One person is going through cancer or something with a divorce or something major going on in their life that's really wreaking havoc. They know that person, but what should they do with the rest of the team?
There's a couple of things. One, I talked a little bit earlier about sort of damage control, is find out immediately what the employee has told the team, right? Understand who else knows so that you can kind of pull everybody, so you can start to plan. I think I often tell managers, first thing you want to do is you want to find out what the employee wants everyone else to know. So you want to understand, is it okay for me to tell them you have cancer? You just divulge what kind of cancer it was. Can I give them all this information? And then they can tell you where they're comfortable at. You bring that team together and you immediately say, this is what's happening. And one of the problems with cancer is that the information usually trickles in. So someone has cancer, some people get cancer and they just need to tell their boss. Other people get cancer and they need to know all the information before they go into their boss. So that conversation with the team may be, we don't know what kind of cancer it is yet, and we don't know what the treatment plan will be, but I give you all the heads up. Here are the things that they want you to know. So, this is where the manager can really get down to basics. Don't say, if you need anything, let me know. as a team, we will be coming up with ways to support this person. So you don't have to do anything individually. We'll work together on that. Right now, they don't want to talk about it. Right now, they are going to be showing up at work every day. Please, the other thing they said is please no puppy eyes, kind of like oh, I'm so sorry, that, patting on the arm, the big eyes.
Workroom brawl again, right there.
Exactly.
Virtual brawl nowadays. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So I think that's the first thing. And then this is where the leadership comes in, is because the manager is going to have to sit down with the team. Let's say the person is only going to be able to work, 3 days a week, and they're a lead on a project. So who is going to work with them on that project, right? Who is going to, this is where the understanding where your employee development work comes in. Who on the team is equipped to help the person? Who on the team will take over the project, which may not be a great thing? Who on the team can do this? So understanding how you're going to have to move your team members around and being really open and honest about that, and open and honest about how long it's going to take. Like this is temporary for 3 months. This is temporary for 6 months. We don't know how long this is going to last. We're not sure. There's a lot of ambiguity in managing a team through a crisis like this. I think the other thing is having those clear conversations with your employee. A lot of times, like your boss said, go, and you needed to go. But a lot of times, manager will do is they'll be like, okay, so they're in charge of these 5 really important projects. So I'm going to pull them off of all 5, or I'm going to pull them off of the 3 big ones and give them the 2 easy ones. The manager thinks they're doing them a favor, but they're not. They're immediately disengaging them when they have to the manager has to think about, okay, this person may want to still work on this project. So let me have a conversation with them about what that work means. Like, what can they do? What can't they do? Instead of just pulling it from them. Because your team is watching you. They're watching how you do this. And if you pull a project, if Mike, if you and I are working together and I know that your favorite project is X, and you've got this illness, and I watch the manager pull your favorite project, I think, oh my God, no, he can still do it. And I want to go in and fight for you. But the message I get from that is, okay, if something goes wrong in my life, I cannot share that information because they're going to pull the favorite things from me that I really like to do.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Right? And we forget that work.
Of course, that's not intentional.
It's not intentional at all. They think they're doing them a favor.
Right. And so really a huge part of this, and one of the questions I ask again and again is, what is your go-to, especially when I'm talking to people who are active in the workplace in the terms of like developing teams? What training do you go back to again and again? And one is communication.
Yes.
Which happens
Amen.
to be what I do. And what you're basically saying is communicate, ask those, expectations that are unrealized or unknown.
Yes.
Never end up at a good spot.
Exactly. I often have the managers do a writing exercise, and it is, tell me what you think a person with cancer can do. And it is amazing what comes out, because they're like, they sit around all day, they get chemo, they throw up, they lose their hair, they get really tired, they watch movies. So that's an image that we all have of people with cancer. And it is sometimes that is sometimes it's a very clear and well-defined stereotype that's true. And sometimes it is not. For me, there was an awakening when I had a person who was kind of adjacent to my team, and his name was Lou Fairland, fantastic man. And he had cancer for years. And he would always say, cancer saved my life. And he would go through and he was actually my personal trainer. Wow.
And so he was a mixed martial arts trainer. And for years in my 30s, I would work with him, and it would push me to go more because he was doing all this stuff. Now, he couldn't do some stuff. He would do isometric, but it was amazing to see. And he had a diabetes, and eventually, unfortunately, he did pass away last year with COVID and the complications. Great loss. And for years though, he held on, and for years he was the epitome of strength and courage and resilience. And if he had been unallowed to do all this, my good friend Lou, then there probably wouldn't have been much to live for. So that's,
Exactly.
I love that, knowing what that person can do. And there's some people that they never stop. And other
Yeah.
people, yeah, I've seen that. So that's a really good point. Thank you for bringing that up.
Exactly. Just check your assumptions because we all have them. We
Yeah.
all have
Check your
them. And so
assumptions. Yeah.
if you can air them before you have these deeper conversations with your employee, then you don't go in thinking that you're going to pull these projects and that they're going to be out of work full time, and you have to rearrange your whole team. And, a lot of assumptions, if you can just air your assumptions, then it clears a lot of stuff up for everybody.
You do, if someone's in crisis, whether it's cancer, whether it's something else, and you come in and say, I want to know what do you need? What do you want? And that person, in the shock, in the moment, in the crisis, says, I have no idea.
Which is usually the response. Or they say, nothing right now. And then they go to put pasta in the pot at night and they realize they're out of pasta. So
Did you have someone who would go get pasta for you?
So what ended up happening the second time is we had a neighbor who became our grocery store. And so she kept things like bread, pasta, eggs. I think she had some cereal and milk, things I just would, because we had people go grocery shopping for us, but I would just forget to put these things on the list. And so she kept the food at her house. And so anytime I was out, I could send one of the kids down the street, go get the pasta, go get the pasta sauce. So it was a lifesaver. It was a lifesaver. I have people walk through an exercise and think about, you can go through this at work. What is your daily life like at work, right? So you get in and the first thing is you turn your computer on. Is your computer working, right? Now I know that we assume that our computer is working. And if it's not working, who do you call? Who do you call? So you could volunteer to be like, hey, anything goes wrong with your computer, call me. I will get it fixed for you. Right. Think about the meetings that you attend. Does one person always do the agenda? Is that something you can take over for them? Think about projects, whatever projects you're on. Is there some part of the project that you can help with a little bit? Don't go in and do it. Ask and see if there's something you can help. Is there research that needs to be done? Are there communications? If you're in sales, the big question in sales is, do you tell the people, if your pipeline is really long, do you tell the people your customers? And if so, how do you do it? Do I need some help? Just, how does this sound? Can I bounce ideas off of you? Or do I take over some of your sales team for you? So there are so many different ways that you can help. And of course, there's the personal life. There's always, I don't know anyone who doesn't need someone to go grocery shopping for them. One of the most meaningful things someone did for me was my neighbor, Nate, came up the street one day. This is after my husband died. And he said, when was the last time the oil was changed in your car? And I couldn't tell him. I couldn't tell him if the light, the little thing was telling me that I needed to get oil. And he said, look, I'll take care of it tomorrow. Leave the keys in the mailbox, text me, I'll get the car. So the following day I got back and I walked out to the car with my children and I started to cry and then I got in the car and started to sob because he had the car cleaned inside and out, and I had children. So, that car was always on the verge of needing a vacuum. He had filled the car with gas, and then he had also had the oil changed. And it was such a simple gift because without my thinking of it, he had lifted this huge burden off of me, right? Putting gas in the car. It's like, hey, if you two are driving to work every day, and especially if you can afford it, and you can help out with gas, be like, hey, can I take your car and I'll go fill it with gas right now? And they're gonna be like, no, I want to take your car and go fill it with gas. And you've just saved them the headache of worrying about filling their car with gas.
Right.
Because when you're in crisis, all the normal things, getting your car fixed, filling it with gas, paying the electric bill, making sure there's food in the refrigerator, all those normal things become extremely burdensome because you've got this other thing in your life that is weighing down and taking over all your headspace. So anything you can do on that level is extremely helpful.
I think that's fantastic. So if you're a manager, listening team member, or it's your manager who's in crisis.
Yes.
This goes, really it's about being human and finding out those needs. And I love the car example, especially because right now, it costs about $1,000 to fill your tank. So doing those kind of things are huge. And don't assume that people have neighbors or family members or church members or friends who will do it. Some people, their work is their life.
Exactly.
And if
Exactly.
somebody at workplace doesn't fill it up, then maybe no one else will.
And there's things that corporations can do as well. I had a corporation I worked with, gave their employee, I think it was a $200 share ride gift card so that they could make their way back and forth between cancer treatments without having to worry about driving. They were single. And so that was such a great gift for them because she could call the Uber and Uber would come and get her and drop her off. And so she didn't have to worry about driving and the spaciness that was happening with her chemo treatment. So there's, we've had employees donate vacation hours, frequent flyer miles to fly a family in, because not everyone lives near their family, frequent flyer miles to fly the person to MD Anderson, which was one of the most moving things that all the company got together, put together the frequent flyer miles. And this man had to go to MD Anderson for treatment, and he was able to go back and forth because he didn't want to stay away from his family often as frequently. So he was able to fly back and forth because everyone got him that. So there's so many different ways that organizations can help, but oftentimes it just takes somebody from the outside. It doesn't even have to be me. It could be your best friend to just take a step back and to go, okay, let's look at the whole picture and everything that they do. And then you'll see all the different ways that you can support an employee or a friend dealing with this crisis.
This has been fantastic, Kim. I thank you so much for all of this. As you're listening to this and watching this, be aware of the situation around you. That's one of my big takeaways. Be aware of the different personalities. Kind of think about it. Have a plan. Just like we're ready for a fire or whatever else might happen. Have a plan, because unlike a fire, which probably won't happen in your workplace, crisis most likely will at some point in time. And the more that I'm in this conversation with Kim, the more I'm thinking, oh, that person, I forgot about that. Oh, that person over there, I forgot about that. Or I forgot about that situation, whether it's big or small.
Can I throw in one stat?
Yeah, do it.
So 46% of those diagnosed with cancer are between the ages of 25 and 64. Those are prime working years.
Yeah.
46%. And we think that doesn't happen in the workforce. Yeah. We just don't think about it.
Yeah, not to mention everything else going on.
Exactly.
COVID. So this has been fantastic. Kim, where can people find out more about this? Because I know we only scratched the surface. Where can other managers, where can other employees, where can people find more about this?
Well, I'm on three different places. My website at 100actsoflove.com, and that's the number 100actsoflove.com. You can find me on Instagram at 100actsoflove, and you can also find me on LinkedIn at Kim Hamer. On LinkedIn, I do LinkedIn Lives weekly. I post weekly. So there you can find some more helpful information on how to support yourself, your team, and your employee with cancer.
Fantastic. Kim, thank you so much for being on here and sharing with us about how to direct and manage this type of situation.
Absolutely. And I did forget, if you want to learn 5 phrases never to say to anybody with cancer and what to say instead, you can go to 100actsoflove.com/what not to say. So what not to say, no capitalized, no spaces, what not to say. And you will learn what to say instead, which is an extremely valuable tool.
Extremely. No, thank you so much. And we'll put those all in the show notes as well. Oh, perfect. And to all of our listeners, thank you so much for being a part of the show. We do this to really help you develop the people around you, whether you're in a spot of leadership or going to be in a spot of leadership. So thank you so much. Take a moment to subscribe, like, share, comment. And until next time, this has been Masters of Employee Development with Mike Acker and Kim Hamer.
Thanks for listening to Advance with Mike Acker, a podcast designed to provide an edge for leaders through improving practical leadership skills and increasing confidence in speaking. Mike is a best-selling author and business owner who has helped many leaders increase their skills and their confidence, propelling them to new heights in their personal and professional endeavors. Join an incredible group of professionals taking the steps to become better leaders at connect.stepstoadvance.com. Don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe so you never miss an episode.